Welcome to the X Podcast. So excited to have you with us today. And I'm back.
Yeah.
It's been a few weeks, but I'm back.
Man, it's so good to see you.
I'm back, and Russ is gone.
Yeah.
Thank goodness.
No.
Don't tell him that. No, he's out traveling the world.
Egypt.
That's where he is. He is in Egypt.
looking
So I'm
up-
sure we'll hear stories about that in the
The
future.
pyramids.
Yep.
All sorts of things like that.
So, but I've been gone for a while, and
Yeah.
I'm back. I got with me Trae and Zach, my good friends.
Yeah. Did you have fun?
Yeah, I
That's
did.
good. What'd you do?
Oh, what didn't I do? I did a lot of traveling. Let me just
Yeah.
say that. I traveled maybe a little bit too much. It was getting a little bit old. I kind of miss being home.
Yeah.
But we traveled. We went to Florida once or twice. It was hot.
You
It wasn't.
telling
Was
me?
it that hot here? We were gone all month of August. It wasn't that hot, was it? Like, death hot.
was
Like
like-
it was
no.
in the hundreds
It was
every
like-
day.
We had like a week.
It felt like, well, I love the heat.
You do.
Yes, you
It-
do.
It felt like summer.
Did it?
And yeah, end of July into August.
Like
so-
80s,
I feel like
90s
Yeah,
maybe.
We hit 90s a couple
Yeah.
times.
See, I like summer in Ohio. After I traveled to Florida, the Caribbean, and Texas, let me just say,
You're just like, it's
I
much
like the
better
temperature
in
here.
Ohio.
It was hot and humid.
Yeah.
Really hot and humid.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, I went on a couple trips, went to go see some friends. So we did that. We went
fun.
on a 6-day cruise with some of our friends in the Caribbean. And so that was good.
Was the food good?
The food was very good.
Yeah. What was your favorite thing?
Oh, gosh. Dude,
The ice
they
cream,
had,
the
they had-
pizza?
no, not the regular ice cream. And the pizza was actually really good. I only got it once. The gelato.
only once?
They had a station of gelato every day, and it was amazing.
my
Creamy. I mean, it was
Did you have a
amazing.
gelato a day?
Yeah, probably at
impressive.
least. It was bad. Yeah. They say you put on about a pound and a half a day.
Oh my
On
god.
I
a
think
cruise
I
ship?
did. Yeah, I think I did. I
Is
had
it
to,
all like buffet stuff still, or have they changed all that?
no,
since-
no. This was crazy. So they have all the buffet stuff, but this ship, it was one of the newer ones for Carnival. I think newer, maybe a few years old. Had a roller coaster on it. We didn't ride it. We tried to. It was
A
broke.
roller coaster on the
Yeah,
ocean?
on the ship. We tried to, but it was kind of broken,
Oh.
and so we didn't.
That would not inspire a lot of confidence in me.
No. But I mean, it's not huge, but it
Yeah,
goes like
yeah.
40 miles an hour. But out, and it goes out a little bit out
Oh
of
my
the
God.
water.
That's
Like we were gonna do it.
wild.
We were gonna do it.
No,
but
thank you.
they have, it's if you've never been on a cruise, they have, they got all the main dining areas, and they got buffet that you can always go
Yeah,
to. Then
yeah.
they have the main dining rooms that you can go to. But this one had all kinds of restaurants on it. And a lot of them you could go to at least once for free. So we only went to the dining room once. I think we did one was a Chinese Mexican restaurant
It's a
combined.
interesting
It's called Chi
combination.
Bang. And it was Chinese. It
Chi
had some
Bang?
yeah, Chi Bang. That's what his name.
Okay.
And it had some Chinese and some Mexican on the menu. It was okay. We went there. They had a steakhouse.
I actually feel like that's like your perfect.
my wife loves
fusion.
Mexican. I love Chinese.
Yeah, I do feel
The
like
Mexican
that's
food
like a
wasn't that good,
perfect-
but the Chinese was pretty decent.
Yeah.
But we went there. They had a steakhouse that you had to pay a little bit extra to go on it. It was really good. Honestly, it was one of the best steakhouses I've
What'd you
been
have?
to. The ribeye, 18-ounce ribeye. It was so good.
Oh, wait, how do you like your
Twice.
steak?
Medium.
18-ounce ribeye.
Yeah. It was bone in.
Okay.
But it was really good. So we had that one night. We paid a little bit extra for some of these. One night we went to a Japanese restaurant they had on the ship with a hibachi grill, which was really
That's
cool.
fun.
It was
I love
that one
hibachi.
was really good. And then they have a barbecue kind of place, Anchor and Bar or something. I forget. It was called Pig and Anchor or something. It's kind of like a relaxed chill. You would like this. It's like a kind of a relaxed kind of environment where they have a bar, they have like restaurant type food stuff, they have games, they have a little stage, and like every night they had like small band or
that's
something. They
cool.
had like
Oh, that's
blues
cool.
bands, like people doing
That's
covers
awesome.
and other stuff that were really good. So we
That's
enjoyed
cool.
getting to
That's
go
fun.
and listen to them. So
So you did cruise. What about after the cruise?
after the cruise, we went to Colorado.
So you saw
And
beach, mountains.
yeah, we went from beach to mountains, and I still like mountains better.
No.
I do.
Yeah.
I'm a mountains
Yeah.
person. I think I'm not like this real mountainous person. But we
like
try to
the
go on some
scenery.
hikes. I love the scenery. It just
Yeah.
my soul gets happy when I'm there.
I mean,
Yeah.
I love the mountains. Like,
Yeah.
but if I had to choose, it's always beach.
Real-
Hands,
well,
hands down.
that's my wife. She would always want to just go plop on a beach and do
Mm-hmm.
nothing, and I go on a beach and I'm like, what are we gonna do?
After about 2 hours,
Yeah.
you're
I'm
like,
not
you're
scared
like,
of
okay.
sharks. So
You're not. Yeah.
No.
What
Yeah.
you looking
know-
at me?
Is that why you don't like the beach? Because you won't go in the water.
That's not true. You have both seen me go into the water, a long way
Never.
into the water.
Nope.
You got your ankles
You
wet.
made me take
You
your
realize that
kids
you're
into the
lying
ocean.
in church.
Let's go.
You got
You're lying in church.
You did go in
I'm
the
just gonna
water
call
when
you
we went
Pastor
to
Russ Jr.
Yeah, when we went to Daytona Beach, you did go in a
I
little bit.
did. I went all the way to the sandbar.
Yeah, that
It
was
was-
pretty far actually.
It was.
So
So I face my fears.
you face your fears.
I do.
But yeah, so we went to the mountains and we spent a couple days kind of going into we went to Breckenridge. We went to some other places that were beautiful. We tried to do some hikes. My wife wasn't feeling good at the time, so we didn't do a ton of hiking. And then she left. I spent a few days there by myself, just kind of working on some stuff. And then we got back. We were only home for a few days. And then last week we went to Texas, your home state,
Yeah.
the home country of Texas.
That's right.
What's the
we went-
national anthem for Texas?
I feel like that's too far in the past.
You don't know.
Probably all of my Texas friends and family will be mad at me, but I don't know. There's like pledge of allegiance to the Texas flag and all that stuff.
Yeah, and to the republic for which
For
it
which it
stands,
stands.
one nation under God,
pretty
indivisible.
sure-
With I think it's so. We
The
had
only
to-
ones I know is all
it's
my exes
so
live in
odd. Every
Texas.
time I've had to fly to Texas, I have to take my passport. I don't know why. And so
It's
we
just a different breed out
but we
there.
went to Texas. We went to San Antonio. You've been to San? You have been. You both
Yep.
have been to San Antonio.
Yep.
You right?
Yep.
You said it earlier. We
Yep.
went to. That's my second time in San Antonio. This time we were there for my daughter's graduation from basic training.
Oh,
the Air
that's so
Force. That
cool.
was such an awesome
Nice.
experience.
Yeah.
It was really powerful.
What was like your one standout memory from that moment?
When they did, the coin ceremony, which was kind of signifying them becoming actual airmen, was pretty awesome because it's super emotional. Like the guy who was giving the commencement speech, he was about to retire, so he got choked up. 23 years, he's going to hang up his uniform, and he's just, and then he steps out from the microphone and he just yells something, it's like one of those, something like that. And then there was I think they had 637 that graduated.
Oh,
So this
wow.
big, huge concrete courtyard that has them all in flights. There was 10 flights, I don't remember how many, and they're all standing in a line, attention, and they all yell back something. And you're just like, whoa, you just felt it. And then all of a sudden music comes in and it's like Joe Cocker, what was the song, God Bless America, or America the Beautiful, I think it was. Is that,
America.
that
one?
Yeah, something like
God
that. Isn't that Joe
shed
Cocker?
His grace
That
I don't
did
know.
that
Yeah,
song?
just keep going.
Yeah, keep going. He's trying to figure
Never
out what
mind.
sound it is. And
Hey,
so they're
Siri.
doing that, and they all come out
What's
with
the song?
the coins, and you got the drill instructors. They go one by one in front of them, and they all
Is that
move
where they
over.
they move over?
Yeah, they move over one. They give them their coin, shake their hand, they move back, and they don't. What's funny is none of the airmen, none of them they don't show any emotion, and they're just standing there at attention, zero emotion, and all of us. I mean, there's 5,000 people, and all the stands. All of us in the row are all just oh my God, I'm so good, I'm so proud. We're all crying,
Yeah.
and they just nothing, no emotion. But so that was pretty cool. And then when they get done with the ceremony, you get to go tap out your airmen, and
that's
so we
cool.
go and they can't move. What's kind of cool is they
can't move.
They can't move until they get tapped out. And so they just have to stand there. And I think they're at parade rest or whatever, and they just look and they see you coming over, and they look at it, but they can't they don't move until you come and tap their shoulder. So it's so it's
That's
just
cool.
there's just the pomp and circumstance
The
of a
military.
military type thing. They
Yeah.
had a small marching band that really does the cadence, the dum dum dum, so they can do the left right, and they're all marching. So that was just moving.
That's
I mean,
cool.
just being on a military base and getting to experience all of that was so powerful.
That's cool.
So it was really cool, and so we got to see her for a couple of days before she shipped off to Keesler Air Base, which is in Biloxi, Mississippi. So
Yeah.
that's where she is for tech school now.
I've heard that San Antonio has the best Tex-Mex food in them.
Okay, I gotta ask your question
You know?
you about this. I have been to Houston. Well, I've been to Dallas, Houston, San Antonio. I've been
Yeah.
to those. I don't know if I've been to Austin, but okay, the few times that I've been there and had Tex-Mex, it's never been anything special.
It's
What
probably
is it?
not.
What is it? Because Tex-Mex, as I looked it up, is literally Texas food infused with Mexican flair, and it doesn't seem like it's authentic Texan food or authentic Mexican food.
No, it's Tex-Mex.
But how do you
I think-
describe Tex-Mex?
I think there's probably key things that make it. Queso up here is always white queso.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah, yeah.
There's not. That's not queso.
It's yellow.
It's yeah. It's like. It's,
I think it should be yellow. I'm with you.
Cheese.
Yeah.
So yellow cheese down
yeah,
there,
yellow
queso?
queso.
Okay.
I feel like Tex-Mex is a lot of ground beef.
Okay.
Like
Yeah.
like ground beef, like crispy tacos.
Crispy tacos.
Yeah, I mean not like fajitas, right? But
Yeah.
so like Joe T. Garcia is this place in Fort Worth that's like known for Tex-Mex,
Yeah.
and they literally have fajitas, enchiladas. So
yeah.
that's very
Enchiladas is
Tex-Mex.
very.
And I think like nachos,
Mm.
and that's all they serve.
Oh.
But I mean, besides like little appetizers.
So would you describe
Yeah.
it? But see, up here, if we went to a place like that, we'd say it's a Mexican restaurant.
Right.
Because we're not in Texas, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Just more options in Mexican restaurant?
I don't know. I feel like the Mexican restaurants here are like they all, I don't know, like they all have like the diced chicken for tacos.
Yeah,
you know,
like
like
or shredded chicken. They wouldn't even do
Shredded
shredded
chicken.
chicken
No,
probably in an enchilada down there, right?
I feel like the salsa is so much different.
Mm-hmm.
Like I think that's how I would always like rate a Mexican restaurant. It's like, is the salsa good?
Yeah. Would
So-
Tex-Mex to you, like when you guys would go to Tex-Mex when you were living in Texas, would that just be almost like going to fast food? Or is it not like, is it like going to a restaurant?
It'd be like I'm trying to think of
Not like
something.
Burger King, but like
Yeah.
quick service, or maybe it's
But
not.
I guess there are some fast food places like Taco Casa is like fast food
Okay.
Tex-Mex, and it's like way better than you can get at Mexican restaurants here that you sit
Really?
down. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, I mean, that's fast food.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's like a Taco Bell,
Yeah.
sort of, but
Yeah.
like better.
More authentic.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I could never tell. Like, and so we were trying to find a place. We found one place on the Riverwalk,
Yeah.
and it was really substandard.
Yeah.
It was bad. It was a
Yeah.
Mexican place. It wasn't
Yeah.
Tex-Mex, but it was like,
Well,
should have known by the name of it. The
Yeah.
original Mexican restaurant. That should have told us
it
something.
was probably
Yeah.
technically Tex-Mex.
It probably.
Yeah.
Well, it
like-
was. I don't think the menu was very big.
I don't think I ever thought
You know-
about food being Tex-Mex until I moved away. Like I just like would go to like Mexican food.
Mexican food.
Yeah.
That's what I would have thought. But I kept
So-
hearing people, oh, you can do Tex-Mex, and I had it once when I was in Houston. I guess it wasn't anything new.
Like
it was like going to a
drastic, that was
Mexican
like, this is
restaurant
so
here.
good.
Was
Yeah.
like going down there. So I'm like, what is this? Is it
Yeah.
anything different?
Yeah, but I don't know what is different, but it is.
Did you get a cowboy hat?
No,
Because I got a cowboy hat for my time in San Antonio.
for real.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
No, I didn't get a cowboy hat. I did like the Riverwalk. That was really
Yeah.
cool. I've been there a couple of times. It's a
Yeah,
beautiful
it's cool.
area. I was like, man, why didn't we do something like that in our downtown? All we had to do is divert some of the Scioto River through our downtown and then build this lake. It's beautiful. So
Yeah.
we like that part of
You
it.
should run for mayor for the city of Columbus.
No.
And just make that happen.
It's too late. So we did that. And one of the things that we also did, which I'd done this once before, but we went to the Alamo.
Well, that's cool.
So you guys have both
It's
been to the
giant.
Alamo?
I've been there. Yeah.
It's giant. I think a lot of people are surprised when they get there because you just hear so much historically about the
Yeah.
Alamo. You're thinking this is big, massive fort,
Fort,
and you realize. I mean, it kind
fortifications.
of was. There was walls around it, but it was really a church,
Yeah.
Spanish Mission.
a Spanish mission, with some walls around
Yeah.
it. It really is very small. You go walking through, you're like, this is it.
This is all they were defending.
Walking through the gardens and stuff.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, so we went to the Alamo, and I like the history of that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I thought that was pretty cool.
Yeah.
Walking through the Alamo, and
You know, there's
Davy
those
Crockett.
Spanish missions throughout that area. Like,
aren't they
throughout-
Spanish churches?
Yeah.
Are they more like
Yeah.
mission? Like they would
I don't know why they
take
call
care
it
of people?
missions,
Why do they
I
call them
guess.
missions?
I don't know. It's probably.
Well, they were probably there trying to win and Christianize the Native American population at the time,
The Mexicans,
or whoever was living there.
Yeah.
So the Spanish
Probably
would
both,
come
yeah.
and
probably both.
they would come
Um,
and they would
Yeah, so
try
maybe
to
they call them
convert.
that.
Yes.
And so read all this stuff. There was I think I saw what was kind of cool was they showed inside of the Alamo all these different flags of the different states or countries
Who were
of people
fighting.
who died there.
Oh wow.
So like Ohio had 4 people. I think it was 4 people from Ohio that died there.
Go Ohio.
And so they had
Defending-
like all these different states. There wasn't all of them, and even some other countries that had people that were there that held up
Yeah.
in the Alamo and fought to the bitter end, and then
Yeah.
died.
They all died.
And so, anyways, there was something fascinating to me when I was there. I was going to ask your guys' opinion on this because we were in the Alamo, and they had, I think they turned it into an inscription that they put on there. It was a letter that was written from the commander, I think, of the troops that held up, or the militia, or whatever they were, frontiersmen. I don't even know how you describe. I guess they were part of maybe the Texas American Army. Maybe,
Yeah.
you know, was Texas part of the Union back in the 1830s, or were they their own country, or was Texas even a thing then?
I don't remember.
I don't think technically.
You're the
they're-
one that grew up in
I
Texas. You
know.
should have all the Texas history.
No, I don't remember.
I don't
remember.
think technically they're a part of it.
Okay.
I don't think so. In the 30s, I think it was like 50s.
Okay. And that might make sense because I think Mexico may have owned. That was a lot of. I know they kept talking about there was the war between Mexico and the United States and Texas, really, over the border.
1845. That's
So
when they
this
became a
was
state.
before this. The
Yeah.
Battle of Alamo was in 1830s, 1836. So this was fascinating to me. One of the commanders, so the commandancy of the Alamo, on February 24th of 1836, he sent a letter to the people of Texas and all Americans in the world.
People-
I don't know that it reached all Americans in the world, but
Probably not.
so here's what he said. And there was one little phrase that grabbed my attention. And I'm just curious what you guys think about it. I'll read this. I don't think it's real long. I'll read this. He said, "Fellow citizens and compatriots, I am besieged by 1,000 or more of the Mexicans under Santa Anna, and I have sustained a continual bombardment and cannonade for 24 hours and have not lost a man." He's pretty proud of that. They've been under attack. "The enemy has demanded a surrender at discretion. Otherwise, the garrisons are to be put to the sword if the fort is taken. I have answered the demand with a cannon shot, and our flag still waves proudly from the wall." So basically, surrender or you're all going to die. I fired back, and the flag's still flying. He says, "Then I call on you in the name of liberty and patriotism and everything dear to the American character to come to our aid with all dispatch. The enemy is receiving reinforcements daily and will no doubt increase to 3,000 or 4,000 in 4 or 5 days. If this call is neglected, I am determined to sustain myself as long as possible and die like a soldier who never forgets what is due his own honor and that of his country, victory or death." So that was William Barrett Travis, Lieutenant Colonel Command. What caught my attention? So that's kind of, I mean, that is brave. I mean, here's somebody's basically, we're going to hold the fort, send reinforcements. If you don't, we're going to die.
Yeah.
The PS is what got me. Literally, there's a postscript. He said this: "The Lord is on our side. When the enemy appeared in sight, we had not 3 bushels of corn. We have since found deserted houses, 80 or 90 bushels, and gotten into the walls 20 or 30 head of beeves." Which I had to ask you,
Cattle.
what's a beeve? And it was cattle.
Yeah.
So when you looked it up, beef.
Yeah.
20 or 30 head of beef.
Yep.
So I was talking with a family member who was there, and he was reading that, and you know, coming from a Christian heritage, you know, there's and they were reading it, and they said, "The Lord is on our side." That's awesome. And my immediate response was he really? It just made me think. I don't know why, but for like the next half hour when we were down there, and I was talking to us, I just couldn't stop thinking about this phrase that the Lord is on our side.
Yeah.
And I feel like that's language, you know, we have worship songs that probably make reference to that because there are some biblical aspects to that phrase in the New Testament,
Yep.
I mean, and in the Old Testament. And so, you know, I thought, okay, that's a statement that if you're a person of faith, you probably throw around pretty easily. God is on my side. Romans 8 says if God is for us, who can be against us?
Yeah.
You know, there's this idea of alignment with God, that Lord is on our side. But then I started thinking about that war, and I got to be honest with you, I don't know a lot of details about the Texas-Mexican War. I'll leave that to our Texas historian who's grew up in Texas. I don't know a lot of details behind it, but I started really asking the question, like, was God on their side? Like, how do we know that God was on their side?
Well,
I mean, because they won, right?
no.
No.
But they didn't win. They all
didn't win.
died.
I feel like growing up, like when I was taught about the Alamo, I mean, it's a big part of Texas history.
Yeah.
I mean, and
Did you guys celebrate anything like?
Yes.
Alamo
Remember the
Day.
Alamo?
Yes.
Is that a specific day that you guys?
gosh, I don't know.
Do you guys dress up?
My memories are about 2 weeks, like in age. That's about all
Oh,
I can
yeah.
remember. But like concrete details. But what I do think, I do think, you know, you're talking about how they lost, right?
Yeah.
Well, my first thought would be like, no, they didn't. Like they won. like But because that's kind of how it was taught to
Yeah.
us. Like,
Yeah.
this is such a big deal, and they fought so hard, and they lasted so long, but no, they lost. And it's interesting on this side of history,
Yeah.
hearing that being read, and like, okay, so you lost, and you're dead. Was God for you and on your side? I guess that's two different. Is God for you?
Yeah.
Is God on your side? Yeah, that's two questions. But
Well, I wondered, in my mind, I started thinking about this application. I think that there is a spiritual claim
Element.
that you can make, according to Scripture, as a follower of Jesus,
Yes.
that God is on your side.
Yes.
But I wonder if we have taken that, which maybe has more spiritual implications, and it's crossed over to geopolitical.
oh yeah,
It's crossed over to international conflicts.
Yeah.
It's crossed over to wars. Because I would imagine that a lot of the Mexicans, and again, I don't know this, and maybe a historian might, I don't know. But I would imagine, because I feel like this is kind of consistent in conflicts around, that a lot of the Mexicans might have felt the exact same way
Yeah.
when
That
they
God
were
was on their
fighting
side.
to try to hold on to land that maybe they thought was theirs.
Yeah.
And I think one of the narratives that I've often heard, maybe just espoused by Americans and people of faith, when you kind of combine them, is just this idea of, well, this is America. God's on our side. I mean, we stand for liberty. We stand for freedom. God's on our side. And maybe, yes, that's true. I just wonder, is there a proper application of that, or do we sometimes misconstrue this idea that God is on our side when it comes to geopolitical wars?
yeah.
Yeah.
I mean,
It's hard.
I think for sure. I think we could all sit here and name different conflicts that, probably from our initial, even back to how I was taught Texas history. That the Texans were the good guys.
Yeah.
you
Right.
know? And I think in a lot of ways they probably were, but I think it's the same thing back to look back in the early time of the United States,
Yeah.
and we were taught that we were the good guys,
Yeah.
and we probably were to an extent, but there was a whole other side that we weren't.
Well, and when I think about the United States getting its start, I think about the rebelling against, England, or wanting the
Yeah.
independence from England so that we could worship how we wanted to worship and all that. And I look at that and go, well, that's noble. That's really good.
Yeah.
I'm thankful, grateful
Oh, yeah.
Yes.
for that today. Like,
Right.
really grateful. I'm grateful for our country. I think it's an amazing country. It has a lot of problems, but it is also, I think, one of the best countries in the world. I think
Yeah.
it has done a lot of good. But I also think, in one breath, we can look at the Revolutionary War
Yeah.
and go, okay, was God on the side of Americans? Maybe for the religious reasons that they fought. I don't know. I don't know if we want to make that claim. Maybe we won the war. Okay, God. But then I'll also turn around and go, those same people are the same ones that we basically wiped out the Native Americans and took the land.
Yeah. It was really interesting. Spent a little bit of time in D.C. with my family. I have 3 boys, right? And they're
Yeah.
all studying U.S. history and Ohio history, and seeing a lot of the really impactful moments that the museums in D.C. have, and getting to walk through and read about it and learn. And I do think I don't know how long a lot of these other museums have been there, but getting to go into one museum that talks more along the lines of the U.S. were the good guys. Here's all the good things that happened, and then you go into another museum and it's like, okay, here's alongside that. Here's some struggles and some things, some conflict that was created by the imperialistic mindset. You know? So it was really interesting trying to talk to my kids and teach my kids, talk to a 7-year-old about that.
Yeah. That's fascinating.
And I think it's this weird conflict of like, we feel like God is for us and God is on our side.
Yeah.
And I think
We as in Americans?
We as
Or
in
just
Americans,
American,
I
probably?
think we as maybe even
Human,
people, like
yeah.
human. It's like
Yeah.
we think, I think it's easy for us to get into this spot to where we, our emotions and our convictions and our intelligence like kind of come together and like, no, we are doing the right thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know? I even think, hearing an impactful talk, whether it's a TED talk or a message at a church, like, what is my wife and I were talking about this, what is the first thing that often a lot of people think? Oh, I need to send this to so-and-so so they can hear it.
Yeah.
You hear a message on forgiveness, and
Yeah.
I need to send this to them.
Yeah, because they are holding a grudge.
Yeah.
You know, I think it's kind of a similar mindset of like, we kind of take the good guy approach.
We're the good guy
Yeah.
in every story. And
Yeah.
and as you said, just even about like America's beginning, that, you know, what it created and maybe what they're fighting for was very good and probably even righteous in some ways. But the same people that did that are the same ones that also used slavery
Yeah.
to develop our country. That, you know what I mean? And so there's a tension in that.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
and let's just also say it goes so far as that some people have. I guess is what I'm saying. Is it ever wrong, or should we be very cautious about leveraging God on our behalf in certain environments?
Yeah.
Well,
Like, what does that look like?
Well, I mean, for me, the answer is yes, based off kind of the context and how we're talking about this thing here. Because I think it's really easy, as we're discussing, to be on one side of a conflict. And as you said, Pastor Trae, to think that your motives are pure
Yeah.
and that your motives are right. And I think it's really easy to get blinders on and just you get lost to everything else that's going on around you. And I would say an old phrase, history's written by the winners.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think that, you know, that's why we look back and we've kind of seen throughout history how stories get twisted in terms of what's right and wrong. But I think that what's hard, like for me personally, why I would never claim that is because we have this God who claims to be for humanity.
Yeah.
Like when I look at the text of John 3:16, where it says, like, you know, God so loved the world that he sent his only son, he died for everyone. Okay, so putting that God in opposition to someone that could result in their destruction or their death. I think anytime you make that claim, it could be interesting. I know where you're going to. I know.
So
where
do
you're
you
gonna go
want
with
to
this.
do you want to continue that conversation just and tell me what do you think about the Old Testament?
Yeah, I know. It is a very.
What?
We don't have time.
What do you mean we don't have time? No. Yeah.
Theological.
Well, okay.
time
Let's
frame.
let's go there. Let's talk
Okay.
about the Old Testament for a
Yes.
moment, right?
'Cause
So the
this
nation
is a
of-
tripping point for
the
a
na-
lot of people.
Well, the nation of Israel had a claim
To
that
land.
God was on our side, on their side,
Well, he told them. He
right?
was, yes.
And we see in moments that God seemed to do supernatural things on their behalf.
Yeah.
Correct.
Whether it's bringing them out of slavery and out of Egypt by doing all these plagues, that parting the Red Sea, we celebrate that, right?
Yes.
God provided a miracle
people
for
died.
his people. He also sent the floodwaters over top of all the Egyptians
A lot
and
of people
killed them. So you know there are moments, but there's also when you look at the 10 plagues, it also seemed like God was making a statement against the foreign and false gods that the Egyptians had worshipped that was
Yes.
not Him.
Yes.
And I would say again, I think there's a difference, and I think you have to understand contextually between the Old Testament and the New Testament. I think the Old Testament, God chose a man, Abraham, that through him turned into a nation, Israel, for a purpose.
Correct.
Not because God loves Israel, but hates all the other nations around him. They're all his creation. Like, I think he loves them all. But the plan was for all people. In fact, the blessing that he said in Genesis 12:3 was that I'm blessing through you, all the peoples in the
nations.
world will be blessed. And so there was a plan for God to bring ultimately his son Jesus through the nation of Israel. Well, there are numerous times where God protected them. Supernaturally. There's times when they were outnumbered. Gideon, you can look at that conflict where he helped rescue them from the Midianites. There's all these conflicts where God seemed to be on their side. There are also times where God was not on their side, and literally God told them through prophets, I'm not with you, I'm against you. There are times when they asked, even, I remember there's one where you had the northern king and the southern king came together to go and fight. And they said, should we go fight them? Have you asked God yet? Well, let's ask a prophet. They got one of the prophets who came, and he basically said, God's not with you. You go, you're going to die. They rejected it. They went into battle. They lost, and that king died. So, like, I think even when you look at the Old Testament, when they were following him, so here's the principle, right? When they were following God and what he had invited them to do, the decrees and the things that he did, it seemed like God was on their side.
Yeah.
When they stopped being obedient and following God, God quickly got off their side.
Yeah.
In fact, God said, I'm against you. I'm going to send the Assyrians to wipe you out, and I'm going to use them as my tool. I'm going to send the Babylonians. So it really does. Now, there was a lot geopolitical in the Old Testament it was through that nation, ultimately through a certain line in that nation, that God would bring Jesus. It seems like things changed in the New Testament, because the story doesn't seem to be as much about the nation of Israel in the New Testament as much as it does under a new covenant, those who receive Jesus by grace and follow him. And so what you find is, like, the Old Testament seems to be the story of a nation. The New Testament seems to follow the story of the church. And that church was not of one nation, but of all the peoples and nations in that time. And so I think even when I look at the Old Testament, there were times when the Israelites claimed the Lord's on our side and they lost. And so I think based on that, you would have to look at the purpose. What was God doing in that moment, in that time with the nation of Israel, and why was he protecting them from people who would come to destroy them or wipe them out, or giving them land? There was a big picture of what God was trying to do globally and for all people. But you see that change. And so, I don't know, go back to what you said, which is God is for all people. I agree. I think God is for humanity.
Right.
The question is, can we claim God is on our side if we think we are fighting for humanity? I think that's what's really hard for me as I was thinking about this phrase, is just over the last couple of years in this rise of nationalism and like how it fits with faith. I continually see, like, there's this pride or sense that, wait, we're America, God's with us. Like, God's not with other nations. Like, they're subpar. You know, we're the best. We're the best nation in the world. We're better. And I feel like that's almost kind of arrogant to declare that, like, somehow God's not with nations in Europe, and God's not with nations in Africa, and God's not with them, even though we might have the might, the military might, and the power to exert our authority or power in the
Well, I guess my
global
question is
scene.
how are we measuring? Like, what is our, like, how do we define, or how do we know God is actually with us or not? What you said was interesting. Obedience. Like, if the nation of Israel was obeying God, then they could assume that God was with them, but the minute that they turned from him, then God wasn't with them. So I think that's the call I've seen. You're talking about recently, over the last 3 years, I've seen a lot of people calling for, we need to get back as a nation to obeying God in order to save America. And I think that's where you see, at least in our current culture, where people are going, saying that we've turned our backs on God as a culture, and we need to get back to obeying him. That's what I've seen, at least.
Do you think that God's on America's side right now? Be careful how you answer.
I think.
What do you think? You think God's on the side of America? I don't know. I just wonder if that's too black and white.
I know. That's what I was going to say. I think that claiming that what I'm doing is what God does, or what I'm doing is what God would do. I think, in a sense, when you say that God is on your side, it's kind of what you're saying. Like, I'm doing what God would do.
It's a pretty.
I think that's a pretty lofty statement to say. And we don't really know.
Right.
You know, and I think like anything in life. I mean, you know, I know sometimes we talk about, you know, in the church world. Like, I remember in high school, it's like I want to do God's will.
Right.
Well, how do you actually know what you're doing is God's will? And if you, oh no, I chose something that's not God's will. Like, am I gonna be punished? And you know, I know that's a whole other thing, but it's like kind of similar mindset to where it's like, you know, to be able to sit here and claim I am doing God's will. That's a big statement. You know, God is on my side. I think, you know, in that example, you know, God's probably going to be with you if you go this way. God's probably going to be with you if you go this way. God's probably going to be with you here if you go this way.
Right.
You know, and so I think, you know, I think if you take that mindset, I think that's a lot different than saying God is on our side and not on your side.
Yeah.
So I think that's
Yeah.
that's the line you're creating when you say God is on our side.
Yeah.
You're also saying God's not on your side.
Yes.
I think that's a lot different than saying God is with us.
Yeah. Two different
And
things.
God is for us.
Yeah, no, two
Yes.
different things. Because one, I agree with you. I actually think you made a good point of a really good, for us, if we process these things in light of current events and today, how do we know where to draw the line with this kind of like language and what we claim? I think a big difference is God is with us. Yes. God is on our side. That means there are two sides.
Right.
So I feel like when I think about the New Testament, I think about Jesus. I think about what he commanded us to love one another as I've loved you, so the world will know that you're my disciples. I do think you can be in God's will when you're doing those kind of things. But I think the difference comes where I'm a little bit cautious to apply it is whenever there are sides.
I guess also like it makes me think, if it's really easy to look back on history and be like, oh, that was very evidently God's work, right? But it's also in that same sense, okay, that part was God's work, but all of these things over here, that was not of God.
Right.
you
Right.
know? But God's still big enough to use it.
Yeah.
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 And so I think maybe even having that understanding. I mean, because there are clear lines of good and evil.
Yeah. Yeah.
And there are clear times where it's like, I think that's the beauty of what our country stands for is we will, we have seen that we will fight for people who need fought for.
Yes.
And we will, do our best to bring justice to those who need that.
Yeah.
Are there a lot of different facets to that?
Yeah.
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 It's because we're people and we're not going to understand. We're not going to be able to. I don't know. I just go back to it's not black and white. It's not.
Yeah.
It's not a God is for me and not you.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think anytime maybe we posture ourselves against someone, I would be really cautious of claiming God's on our side.
Yes.
However, versus, I think you can posture yourself for people and want to serve people and reach people and meet people where they are and provide for people that don't have anything. And, I think you could say, I'm for people. I almost feel like, I don't know if I claim that, but I almost feel like God would be on your side because I think God is for humanity. And I think, whenever you create an enemy out of someone, I think, even as righteous as it is, because I think about currently culture wars.
Yeah.
And I made a claim when I did a series on at the beginning of this year. I was like, I think if you're a follower of Jesus, then your mandate is not to be in a culture war because we're not fighting, at least not flesh and blood enemies. We're not fighting against the same very people that God wants us to serve and to reach with a message of hope. But I think there are a lot of people today of faith who really feel like we're in a battle and a culture war. And I think what gets a little scary is that enemy now has a face.
Yes.
It's not a spiritual thing, but they have a face. Oh, it's that political party. Oh, it's that group of people. Oh, it's that ideology, that are the people that lead that ideology. And, I think those are the questions that I have more about claiming.
But I think I have a lot of sympathy though for people who want to claim or feel like God is on their side.
Yeah.
Because when it feels like the grounds are shifting or culture is moving or you do have an enemy that's in front of you, I think there's a level of comfort or there's a level of assurance that I think we all are like seeking and looking for in those moments. And so I think I do have sympathy for people who at least want to think that way, even though if maybe it's true or not true, or time will tell, what side God is actually on. I understand the thought process.
I think I'm on the opposite side of that though, and it might be the cynical side of how I think, but I'll probably write somebody off really quick if they say this is what God has told me that.
Yeah.
No, not that far. I guess just give me an example.
This is the righteous thing.
Yes.
I'm doing the
Give me
righteous
an-
thing.
yeah.
They're evil.
I guess give me an example of a good leader who isn't using the God is on our side in a non-manipulative way. You know what I mean? Like, you know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
like from a political standpoint, from a, you know, from, I don't know. Like, I mean, I feel like you could pull that statement in a very manipulative way.
No, I
and
agree.
It will hit the people who have those thoughts.
Yes.
It will hit
The
people-
fear.
Yes, the
Yeah.
fear of like, oh, well, if God is
Yes.
on their side, then they're right, and they're not going to
Yes.
use their mind. They're going to close their minds off to
Yes.
like what is probably a bigger reality than what they're even exploring.
Correct. No, I think that's the challenge for me because I think everything that we're saying at this table, I can follow the logic that Pastor Tim and Pastor Ray, you guys are applying. I just think for me, I understand people who have a fear.
Yes.
There is a sense of like, okay, then where do we get our assurance from?
Sure.
Because there are a lot of Bible verses that talk about that our assurance comes from the Lord and that our strength resides in the Lord in
Sure.
those things. And I can understand when someone comes along and offers and says that God's on our side.
One other thought toward that, I think,
Yeah.
just as you're talking, I'm thinking like I think there's a difference in a leader who says, "Hey, I feel like this is what we need to do,"
Mm-hmm.
or "I feel like this is what God is leading us to do."
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
That's really different than, "Hey, God is on our side." Again,
Yes.
it's back
Right.
to laying
No,
those
that's good.
lines.
That's really good.
I agree.
You know?
The language matters.
Yes, it really
and,
does.
And I think that I think probably for me, and everybody has different lives and different thinking, but for me, if I hear someone say, "God is on our side,"
Yeah.
with no real context or and because that's what you hear, and I know we hear sound bites and we hear media stuff, but I think it's I think that's where it's very evident. It's very evidently manipulation.
Yeah.
Mhm.
It's like, well, I don't really have much more to stand on, so I'm going to pull the God card.
Yeah.
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 You know?
Yeah.
I agree. I think that when I think about application of what you're talking about, like how does it flesh out in real life and where is it used properly? I guess the simple category I put in it is especially in the New Testament, there's a spiritual understanding to a war or a fight that we are in against the principalities, the powers, and rulers of the air. It talks about in Ephesians 6 that there's a struggle against evil. There's a struggle against sin that is like people that are they're causing a lot of pain and hurt. And I think that it's safe to me to have an understanding of saying when I am trying to do what I think Jesus would do in this situation, that I feel like I'm going to have God's strength and and that God's going to be with me. I think where we have to be careful, obviously, I think what you're alluding to is the manipulation of getting other people to join into what seems to be often more of a political thing or than it
Come
really
on my
does.
side and advance my agenda.
It's not about serving or reaching or helping
Right.
others. It's more about positioning ourselves
Themselves.
on one side and someone else on another side.
Yeah.
And I think those are the areas that I feel personally a little bit uncomfortable
Yeah.
with claiming the God card.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, God's on our side,
No, I agree.
and He's not on your side. And I mean, I think that's almost. I think back to it, and I can't think of anything specific, but I almost feel like old clips and things I've heard of presidents and other things when you're going to war. A lot of times, that's the language that's used even in presidential speeches.
Yeah.
Yeah.
God is with us. Fight bravely. We're gonna. You know what I
Probably
mean?
quote that verse that you referred to. If God is for us, who can be
Who can be against us? And I also think that in hindsight, looking back, I don't think that victory in our lives is a great determiner of whether or not God was with you. And the reason why I say that is because you look in like Hebrews chapter 11, right? This chapter that lists all these different heroes of faith. And it talks about all these people that were heroes of faith that never got to see the promise, that lost their lives, that were sawn in two, that were like, that because of their faith. I don't think they were fighting a war, but what I'm saying is like, they could easily claim God is with me. And I think sometimes the thought is, so nothing's going to happen to me. And that's not a reality. I mean, Jesus told all of his disciples, like, and the apostles who went over, is like, you're all going to die for this cause. And they all lost that battle.
Right.
Right? But I would say God was on their side. And
Right.
so I think we have to be a little bit cautious when we look back in history and we go to the Texas-Mexican War. Well, at the Alamo point, God was not on their side. He wasn't with the Mexicans. But in the end, the Texans won. That's U.S., so I guess God was on our side. And you could say the same thing about our battles with the Native Americans. You go, well, God was on our side. And I think sometimes that language was used even with people that have a different faith.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That, to me, is also almost like, well, I have the real truth and
Yeah.
real faith in God, and you don't. So God's on our side, and he's not on your side. Well, I actually kind of see it a little bit differently. You may have an authentic faith, and it may be true, but I think God is also for that person too.
Yeah.
Even if they're lost, or even if they have a belief that doesn't, and they don't recognize God, or they don't know. Like, I think God still cares about that person.
Yeah. One thing that's been rattling around in my brain throughout this conversation, pulling something from that both of you said. You referenced an earlier series that you did where you said that we're not called to participate in a culture war, which I think is good. But then you also made a distinction that there is very clear good and evil in the world, which I agree with. I think that's really good. And so how do we know? Like, I've read a lot of things. Like, okay, so coming out of college, a lot of my friends felt like, as they were learning about who Jesus was and learning about this, that every Christ follower is called to be a pacifist. Like, how do you know the line? Okay, for people who are following Jesus in a New Testament way, to like participate in a conflict, whether it's like an actual geopolitical conflict or a culture war conflict or different things like that. What's the line?
What exactly are you asking? Because
like-
that's a little bit different now if we're talking about pacifism. But what do you?
Well,
what are you
like
saying?
we were talking about, like, okay, if God is on our side or not. Like, okay, if we're going to be a little, not hesitant, but if we're going to think carefully about when we're claiming if God is on our side or not in a conflict or in a space, like, should we even be participating in
Well,
conflicts?
I think those are two different things. I think, should you be participating in a conflict? I mean, when you think of the geopolitical realm, I think that question is raised all the time.
Yes.
I mean, you could. This question has been raised for the last 2 years now with Ukraine. I mean, you got Russia that
Yeah, it's all
invades
coming back.
Ukraine,
Yep.
and the big question is, should NATO or other countries, even though they're like allies, but they're not in NATO,
Yeah.
should they be coming to their aid? Should they be helping defend them? I think that's a different question than declaring, well, God's on our side and not
In
on
the
their
con-
side in the conflict.
Yeah.
And I think there's a personal level to that where, you got to remember back in even Vietnam and even before there's always been a little bit of space for conscientious objectors.
Yeah.
And I think if you have a personal objection to that, then I think you have to process whatever that is in regards to your requirements. Like, it's interesting here in America, there's not a mandatory draft. They're not even really using the selective system anymore for the draft or any of that stuff. I don't even think people have to file with it
register
anymore. I don't even know if they do. But a lot of countries around the world, you're required.
You have to serve
Turn
military
like
time.
18 years old, you got to do 2 years. You got Israel, you got to do 2 years. I think, where was it? Was it Serbia? Where did the dude that won the MVP in the NBA went back, and I think there was all kinds of questions about
Giannis?
about Djokovic,
Oh,
about
yeah.
going back, and there's like
Yeah.
questions about like serving in the military over there. And so
Yeah.
in certain countries, you don't have a choice.
Yeah.
I don't know what happens if you want to be a conscientious objector in Israel. I don't know that you have a choice
Yeah.
in there. And you may not have a choice. I think that's a personal, but I think that's a little bit different than claiming politically or nationally or in whatever conflict, God's on our side.
Yeah.
And he's
Yeah.
not on your side.
Yeah.
I think a lot of damage has been done throughout the years of history with people who've made those claims.
Yeah.
People who've gone in, and some people would put Russia in this category right now, going in and invading another country that's not looking for conflict with you and can claim that, well, God's on our side. We're trying to fight back because they actually say the West is evil,
Yes.
right? Putin says the West is evil,
Yep.
that we're the problem.
Yep.
And we're sitting there going, no, you're the problem.
Yeah.
So who's right? I mean, I guess that's where you go. History will determine that by the victors of.
I just say don't claim that God is on your side.
That's what I mean.
Really, I
Yeah.
think as people we need, like, we're always going to want the what do we do?
Yeah.
What's the line? What's
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
what's? But I think we have to develop some ability
To be
to
okay in the gray.
understand the black and whites and also like operate in the gray
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's
really
good.
well. And
It's good.
I think if someone's like, so when do you say that God is on your side? I just say don't.
I don't know if I have a problem with saying it in spiritual context. I think that's probably the place I feel the
Yeah.
most safe about saying it, or even the fact of like you're really doing. But again, I wouldn't use that language probably in conflict. I think that's where I would avoid
That's
it.
probably good.
I just wouldn't use it in conflict. Whatever. I don't care. It could be personal conflict.
Yeah.
Because let's be honest, you have a problem with somebody else. It could be within the church community. It
Yeah.
could be in your own family. What are you thinking in your head? I'm right. They're wrong.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And a lot of times, it even you know how delirious we get in our own minds to the point of, you are. We use this language. You're sinning against me and against God. Like you are totally in the wrong. Like you know. And they're probably thinking the exact same thing, right? So
Yeah.
I don't even want to get into a personal conflict and go, well, I know we're having it out, but you know, God's on my side.
Right. Yeah.
Whoa,
That's really
well,
good.
I think the safest place is if it's not in conflict,
Yeah.
where you're not creating sides
Yeah.
with another person.
Yeah. That's good.
Maybe whether it's geopolitical, whether it's personal, but I think when it comes to spiritually, even though you go through hard times, like you were saying earlier, I mean, there's a lot of people that claim, well, God is on my side when I'm going through a battle of cancer. And I could believe that God is on your side. It doesn't mean you
Gonna
may not
win.
defeat the battle of cancer.
It goes back to what you said. Like victory doesn't need to be the determining factor of
Yeah.
if God is on your side.
Yeah.
Yeah.
In the natural.
Yeah.
In the
Right?
natural.
Because that's the
Right.
thing. Because sadly, we've all known people that, pray and believe, and for whatever reason, God's like, yeah, I'm not going to intervene in that situation. But I think God also has a much bigger picture, and I don't know that I don't know that his picture of humanity in our world is drawn with the same geopolitical borders that we've drawn them with.
No.
That's good.
I mean,
Yeah,
I just
that's
think
good.
I think God loves people in general. And so I think if you're for people and you're doing things for people, you're not going to see a side. So almost
Right.
like what you said, I almost think it's not language that I would use with when in conflict
Yeah.
Yeah. At all.
with somebody else. I think that people do, though. I know this might rub some people wrong, because I think that there are a lot of people right now who see the situation of our country, and whether it's spiritual and
Political.
cultural clashing, I think there are people who see like that it is a conflict.
Yeah.
And I understand that. And I'm not saying that there's not evil, and like you said, there's not good and evil at war right now in our culture. I really believe there are. I want to be cautious. I guess I would just say be cautious of using that language, especially if you are someone of faith and you are arguing or fighting with somebody who's not a person of faith.
yeah.
Yeah.
I think nothing else would alienate that person from ever
More,
believing in
yes.
God,
100%.
especially if you're not treating them well.
Yes.
Is to apply and go, well, God's on my side.
Yeah.
You'll find out in the end, well, you die. And it's like,
That's
that's
the
not
worst.
loving. That's
Yeah.
not the heart of Jesus. So
Yeah.
just maybe avoid it.
Yeah.
So I just, again, I don't know if maybe you're watching this, you're listening to it, and this may invoke some emotion. And it made me pause and think when I read that statement, thinking, here's a guy who wrote this in a battle against other humans for property, land, a fort, who claims God is on our side. And I think the context of him saying that, I just want to point out, is saying we didn't even have supplies and we were able to get supplies. This seems like God was helping us.
Yeah.
And then they still died
Yeah.
however many days later.
Yeah.
And so I don't know. That was it was just one of my things when I went
Thank you,
when I went to
William
Alamo.
Travis, for the podcast.
Yeah.
Episode.
Yeah, I don't know. I think if anything, there's a good application for us as followers of Jesus to just be careful this is bad, right? Be careful how we throw around the God card.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Maybe that's the takeaway.
Yeah.
Be careful how you throw around the God. I'm not saying that God's not on your side, because I think Romans 8 declares it, and I believe it. But I think that's in terms of a spiritual sense.
Yeah.
Yeah.
of that God is for you, who can be against you? And literally, it's what it's talking about in there.
Yeah.
There's a few verses later. It says,
Yeah.
can anything separate us from the love of God? Love of God that's in Christ Jesus? Can demons? Can angels? Can the nothing is going to separate us from that aspect of God's love for us. He's on our side. So, anyways,
It's good.
any last thoughts or no?
No, that's good.
That's really good.
All right. Well, if you're watching this or listening, and it ruffles your feathers, because I do think that I've talked to a lot of people. I understand there's people that
Yeah.
really feel like we're fighting a war. And if you're a Christian, you should be in the trenches fighting this war culturally. And I want to say there's a lot of evil going on. There's good and evil. There is a battle going on. But I want to be in the trenches fighting for people,
Yeah.
even if they think differently, if they have different views politically and policy-wise and what they believe is right and wrong. I still want to be in the trenches fighting for them. And I think if we do that posture, then we can say, well, God is for us because he's for them, and so be cautious. But if you disagree, hey, guess what? Good news. Russ should be back. Russ should be back soon, and he would love to get your email
Yes,
and would
he will.
love to jump in and weigh in
Respond
on
to you.
this and process this. So,
Yep.
let us know if you have any thoughts and reflections on this, and if you've seen places in history where this has been used, and you kind of go, crusades,
Yeah. That makes
marching
sense.
under the banner of the
Yeah.
cross, turn or we're going to kill you. And we look back. I think in church history, I think most people look back on that with a little bit of a black eye and go,
Yeah,
that
that
was
was not
pretty
good.
bad.
Yeah.
I don't know that we should have been marching under the banner. God was with us as we were wiping out
Yeah.
in full villages. But,
Yeah.
again, that's just my opinion. So, anyways, it's good to be back.
Good to have you back.
And it's great to be back.
Glad you're
And
here,
thank
man.
you, as always, for tuning in. If you've been sticking with us, if you got comments, send them in. You can always email us to podcast@thex.church. Leave a review. That really helps get the word out. Maybe share this with
Yeah.
somebody that you think feels differently than us. And when they get really upset, have them send an email directly to russ.moore@thex. Send it to, and I hope Russ has a great time with his
Yes.
dad traveling around the world.
Yep.
And so it's great to have you with us. Until next time, have a great week.